you proud. So let us first get into some crypto basics so we can set the foundation. All right, so what is crypto? Crypto is basically an online borderless digital money system that functions outside of central entities. So effectively an open, transparent, secure way to be able to have a programmable money database to be able to interact with each other. So say a buyer wants to initiate a transaction. Okay, that transaction gets sent into a cryptographic hashing process. Okay, and this information is going to get distributed into databases where there's usually a group of computers trying to solve mathematical equations and cross-check that transaction with the other computers in the network. They're paid in the form of fees for facilitating the security and the communication of the network. And then that database then allows the seller to be able to receive the transaction. And there's all different uses for cryptocurrency, but I've boiled it down to the three most sort of simple to understand, I guess, general buckets that they would fall into. Okay, so the first is going to be something called store of value. So basically a hedge against inflation and currency debasement from a centralized entity. An example probably we're most familiar with is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the definition of a store of value cryptocurrency. All right, the next would fall under the category of decentralized finance. Now, this is a relatively wide bucket, but picture this being a transparent, programmable way to do financial transactions, to be able to automate things, set conditions. We'll get a little bit more into the details of that in a second, but big examples that are widely known are Ethereum and Solana. Okay, then we also have stablecoins. Now, stablecoins, for example, Tether or Circle or USDT, USDC, are basically pegged to the value of the fiat traditional currency. So Tether is going to mirror the exact value one-to-one of the dollar, which is going to allow you to put dollar equivalents onto the blockchain and be able to interact with these other cryptocurrencies relative to the value of the dollar. And that is the function of a stablecoin. And there's all different real-world use cases for blockchain. We can see cybersecurity, cloud storage is a big one, improving the efficiency of insurance claims, intellectual property, healthcare, voting, privacy and ID, global payments and currency. There's infinite amounts of use cases that we're starting to see become very apparent to take the clunky system that we have currently and potentially be able to program this and clean up its efficiency. Okay, so as far as the open-endedness of the opportunity of, especially in the DeFi space, as far as real-world application is massive. I think just right now what we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg where we're seeing the use case of the tech. If and when we start to see this actually be injected into our systems, then we could potentially have open-ended growth from there. And that sort of plays into the true opportunity that I see with crypto right now. Okay, so first let's talk about the store of value and why crypto poses an enormous investment opportunity in my opinion. 45% of the purchase power since the 2000s has essentially been eroded by the Federal Reserve and the global markets, taking the purchasing power of $100 now equaling only $54 over the course of 24 years. What's even more alarming about that is that 23.6% of the buying power has been lost in just the past 5 years, from 2020 to 2025. Right now, the central banks are actively debasing the value of the currency, and they're effectively stealing from people's work. If you worked to save up 20% of your income over 5 years, you've effectively been robbed from the global banks, and they've built up the system, and they just keep adding more and more money to try to not break the system that they have, and effectively silently robbing everyone who's participating. Conversely, this is the chart of Bitcoin since 2020, right? So like we said, negative 23.6% purchasing power on the dollar, plus over 1,300% gain in the same amount of time in Bitcoin. Considering Bitcoin is a store of value token, we can start to see how these two are inversely correlated. And as an investor, I think it's important to understand what the actual traits of money are. So over here, we have a list of the important traits, and we have cross comparison between Bitcoin, gold, and fiat, or US dollar, or any other global currency. All right, and you can see, typically as a store of value, people tend to look at something like gold. Now, if we look at how verifiable gold is, recently there was claims about not actually having the gold reserves that were being claimed by countries and requiring manual